Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kristen, the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at IIT. And today we have a presentation from two alumni. The first is State Senator Suzy Glowiak, and the second is Angela Ng, who is president of our Young Alumni Council. So I am going to turn it over to them to begin the presentation.
Great. So I just want to let you know that I'm really honored and humbled to be chosen to share my experiences of campus and as well as civic leadership. So I started in IIT a long time ago, 1981. There were 3 women in the mechanical engineering program. I was working full-time at that time and going to school at night. And then I decided I really needed to be part of the real campus community. And so I started going back to school full-time during the day. And at that time, I really got much more involved in campus life. So I was involved in the Society of Women Engineers and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And as I got more and more involved in those organizations, I met more and more people. And I really felt a much better, bigger part of the campus life. And as I worked more and more in these extracurricular activities, I took on more and more leadership roles. So I got involved in Society of Women Engineers and eventually chaired the IIT chapter. And I was also very involved in ASME, and I eventually chaired the IIT chapter of ASME. So I think leadership, kind of started at IIT when I was there. And I was given awards for leadership senior year, and that's really where it all started. I think it's where you gain confidence. It's where you learn organizational skills when you're in school and taking on leadership roles. You have to be more organized in order to be able to maintain your classwork and then also be involved with organizations. And you build relationships. And really that's what politics is about. It's about building relationships, being organized, showing up. So that's what I learned at IIT through campus leadership. And it's about, trying and sometimes making mistakes when you're trying to lead people. And that's how you learn. So really civil leadership is about negotiation and compromise, and building relationships is key, I think, to accomplishing these things. And engineering, it feels kind of like the opposite when you're taking the classes and everything seems black and white, although engineering design is really all about compromise and balancing the competing trade-offs. There's cost, function, safety, those kind of things you build into design. In leadership, in politics, you have to make compromises. Sometimes your bills are too strong and you get a lot of opposition, and you need to work with all the stakeholders at the table and make those policy decisions together. So many policymakers are lawyers. But should lawyers really be making the substantially technical issue policies like clean energy, or deciding on what to do for designing and dealing with environmental change? So that's one of the great things about being an engineer in politics is I bring a little bit different skill set to the policy making. So those joining politics without formal political backgrounds, such as engineers, they're motivated and driven by more different policy goals than the professional politicians. But engineers, I think, bring a really good, broad way of thinking and making decisions. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I think the next slide maybe talks a little bit about what I'm interested in next. Yeah, a little bit about my background. So my campus experience, so I graduated in '83, and then I had a family, started a family, And I was working, and my mentor at IIT was a professor named Ralph Barnett. I don't know if, maybe some of you remember him. He was a professor, longtime professor in the mechanical engineering department. And I began working for Ralph Barnett when I completed my undergraduate at IIT in '83. And so he was my mentor, and I worked for him for many, many, many years, 22 years actually at Triodine. And then while I was working at Triodine, I furthered my education. I went to Northwestern and got a master's in manufacturing engineering there. But for about 22 years, I did engineering consulting and learned a lot about building relationships and meeting people. And I want to tell you a little bit about my community involvement, what I did in the community in order to position myself to kind of meet more people and network, and then work toward becoming more involved in politics, local politics, and then state politics. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think it tells a little bit about my campus experience. So this is really where it all started. The leadership roles at Society of Women Engineers, and we started the intramural volleyball at IIT with Society of Women Engineers, and then we got everybody to start playing volleyball together. So we met, the civil engineers and the mechanical engineers, and we kind of had a lot of fun doing that. There weren't enough women to field the team, so we would kind of bring in some of the guys as well. So, but that's where it all started, with leadership with ASME and Society of Women Engineers. And I think the next slide goes on a little bit more about what I do, what I did as an engineer. And I did forensic engineering, which is kind of the interface between law and engineering. So I investigated accidents and would testify about them in the courtroom. And that also kind of prepared me for the political arena, which is a little bit more adversarial than some typical engineering paths. So I think the next slide talks a little bit about what happens with, that's my family, that slide is my kids, they're all grown. So community involvement I was involved in my kids' school and met a lot of people that way. Took on leadership roles in the school system and in my church. And then I became involved in community, and I became a rec commissioner. And so as a rec commissioner, I met many people. And from there, I was pulled to become a trustee in the town that I live in. I live in Western Springs. And as a trustee in Western Springs, I met more and more people in the kind of the political arena. So if you want to go kind of the next slide, there we go. So I started on the rec commission, and I was there for 8 years and eventually chaired that commission for the last couple of years I was on it. And we made all kinds of policy decisions about infrastructure, we built a new recreation center. And then after I was on the rec commission, a couple of years later, I was asked to run as a village trustee. And so I was a village trustee then for 8 years. We have term limits, so I had 2 terms as a trustee and learned about making policy for the town that I lived in. And in 2014, I decided, well, I think it's time to run for state senate because I really enjoyed making policy and I thought I could do some good for the state. And I received only 40% of the votes at that time and learned a whole lot about running for office and what mistakes I made helped me to run in 2018 and successfully become a state senator. So I think the next slide tells a little bit about how it was, my campaign. If you're interested in working on campaigns, the most important thing is knocking doors. And so throughout the fall and winter of 2017, I knocked on doors and continued doing that. So I would just, I'd walk up to a door. I had usually the person's name and maybe their age, before I did it so that I at least knew something about them before I knocked on the door. But I learned a lot about people. I met all kinds of different people doing that. I had all kinds of experiences and learned, boy, there are a lot of different kind of people in the world. By doing that, I learned a lot about people and about the neighborhood that I was going to be representing. So each Senate district is broken up by population. And in each Senate district, there are 220,000 people living in it. And so when you knock doors, you knock thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. And I knocked more doors than any other Senate candidate running in 2018. And part of being involved politically involves raising money. So we raised and spent over $1 million for print, television, advertisements, and for staff. And this was a fairly large amount of money for a Senate campaign, but we felt necessary in order to put our message out there and let people know about me as a candidate. So that was kind of an exciting time. If you're thinking of running for office, it takes over your life. It consumes all of your waking moments, but it's certainly worthwhile, especially if you can prevail. So campaigning is grueling, but I learned a lot about people and a lot about myself. And I was elected to Senate in January 2019. And at that time, instead of losing 60-40, I actually received just over 50% of the votes. And so I wanted to let you know there are 59 senators in Illinois, and each Senate district there are 2 representatives. And the requirements to become a senator are you've got to be 21 years old, a citizen, and you have to live in your specific Senate district for 2 years prior to running. And I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the 24th Senate district, which I had to write them all down, all the towns. There are so many. We go from Western Springs all the way to Wheaton. So that would be Elmhurst and Hinsdale, Clarendon Hills, Glen Ellen, Oak Brook, Oakwood Terrace, Lisle, Lombard, Western Springs, Westmont, and Wheaton. And so it's a pretty big area, and it's a lot of people that I got to meet and learn about and to be able to represent. And in the first 100 days in office, I was able to pass 5 bills on to the House, and hopefully those will get through the House and also make it to the governor's desk for signing. And I've co-sponsored numerous other bills too. That's another thing that you get to do as a senator is work with other senators on their bills and try to help gain some traction by co-sponsoring and helping get the word out about specific bills that you're interested in. So if you want to switch to the next slide, it talks a little bit about the district, and the way these lines are drawn is some people call it gerrymandering, others call it what I have introduced a bill for fair maps, which would take some of the political interest out of the line drawing of the maps. But I just wanted to give you a little idea of what the Senate district looks like. It's kind of a badly shaped puzzle piece, but the way it fits in, it cuts through towns and neighborhoods, and it is my district. So this 24th district is specifically 220,000 people. So some of the bills, I just wanted to give you a little bit of indication of some of the bills that I have sponsored myself. One is there is in the state of Illinois a dementia plan for Alzheimer's disease, and the plan for the state of Illinois has really not been implemented because there hasn't been a coordinator. And so through the Department of Public Health, I've created a position to make sure that that plan will be implemented in the state of Illinois, as there will be a coordinator who does support caregivers and those also affected by the disease. And so we're hoping that will improve the lives of many people in the state. There are over 200,000 people affected by the disease, and each of those people also has support and caregivers that are affected. So we're hoping we do some good in the state with that. I've also advocated for Native Americans as a senator, and one of the bills specifically looks at making certain that state jobs are open and accepting of Native American residents. A couple of my bills have to do with consumer protection, and one of them has to do with whether people are a clear and present danger to themselves or others. And what we would like, what that bill does is requires the Illinois State Police to identify people that are a clear and present danger, and that those people then will be identified per town and school, not specifically named, but at least we'll have an idea of how many people in specific areas are a clear and present danger. So, engineers and politics. So the most common profession, of course, for politicians worldwide is law. 20%, engineers are 7%, and in the Illinois State Senate, there are only 2 of us who are engineers. And so there's certainly room for more. That's only 3%. So it would be great to have more engineers involved in politics. And I think given the training that we get as an engineer, we can make good policy. We are more detail-oriented. We consider things a little bit more black and white. I know that politics is kind of gray, but I think when you're looking at policy having to do with clean energy or environmental change, engineers are really a key in making those changes. So the presidents that were sort of engineers, Jimmy Carter was an engineer in nuclear propulsion in the Navy. Eisenhower came from a family of engineers and was in the Army Corps of Engineers. But we do need many more scientists and engineers to determine public policy issues, I think, because we have a different kind of mindset and ability to solve problems. So I wondered if anybody might have any feedback or questions, or otherwise I'm happy to. I wanted to thank you and let you know that I'm very honored to be able to give you my presentation. And thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions. The first one, I think you addressed a little bit, but do you think more scientists are needed in politics? But also, what made you decide to make the jump from engineering to civic life?
Well, I think I kind of explained how I got involved in different kinds of leadership roles, and how I thought that helping people through leadership, I started, through the community, through my church and my kids' school life, and just kind of continued in leadership roles, including being leadership roles in my local government, and thought that policy making on a state level would be even more interesting to accomplish and do things for people in the state. And how I got interested, I think it's because people asked me to run. I think especially women are a little more hesitant to run for office. I think women have to be asked something like 7 times before they actually say yes and agree to run. So I think if we can encourage more and more women and more engineers to run, I think more people will be involved that are representative of all areas as opposed to just law or politics or political scientists.
Great. We had another question. How have you found the experience of reaching across the aisle to work with other state senators who don't agree with your positions?
That's a terrific question. That was one of the more surprising things that I found, was that people on the other side of the aisle were really willing to work with me. That people are very collegial in the state Senate, and that people want to get things done and are really, really willing to compromise and find out your views. And that was one of the things I was most surprised about in the state Senate.
Perfect. And then I think our last question just came in from Gabrielle. And if I'm not phrasing this correctly, Gabrielle, please feel free to correct me. But I believe their question was, in regards to making policy, how have you found the process to be either collaborative or consolidated? And what is the difference in developing policy between your current role in the state Senate and when you were with the Western Springs Rec Commission?
Okay, well, the difference between developing policy at the state level versus the local level is just a matter of scale. I think you're representing, in Western Springs, when I was a trustee there, we represented 13,000 people, and pretty homogeneous group of people, because we all lived in the same town. So the policy making, a lot of the policy making was done by a lot of the staff members, and the work was really done by staff. And then they would come to the trustees, and we would, talk about the policy, the bigger, broader policy issues. With the state, it's a much bigger, scale. So we're talking, instead of talking about like a specific, one small specific project, we put in a new water plant in Western Springs when I was there, which was helpful that I was an engineer, because I could understand some of the things that, and you do get much more involved with specific contractors. I mean, as a trustee, I actually met with and talked to and interfaced with the actual constructors of the water plant, where in the state government, you sure don't get that involved. You don't get into the weeds that much with things, and you look at it from a much higher altitude and try to make the decisions further away, not as hands-on. So I think that's the biggest difference, is you're much more hands-on in the local government than as opposed to the state government, because it's, it's a much bigger scale.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to chat them either to me at the Illinois Tech Alumni Engagement account, or to everyone, and we will do our best to get them answered. But if there's no further questions right now, we will turn it over to Angela Ng for the second half of our Hawk Talk. And thank you again, Senator. We have really appreciated this.
Oh, great. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'll just put it on mute. I'll be happy to listen to Angela. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. All right. Mm-hmm. And now we'll turn it over to Angela Ng.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Senator. It's really inspiring. I'm kind of getting to that point of where you mentioned before of turning into civic engagement. So it was just really inspiring. So as far as my presentation goes, it's going to talk about getting involved, taking the lead in volunteering. So this is kind of a subset and more in detail of, I hope that there's some overlap with what the Senator had talked about earlier, and how she kind of got to that point. So I've tried to make this presentation for students and the working professionals. So excuse me if like some of the slides aren't totally applicable. So next slide. Here's just an overview of what I'll be talking about. I'll give a little spiel about myself. Try not to go too long-winded, but a lot of it is going to talk about what I did on campus and also off now that I am working professionally. So why well, why volunteer, where to start, how to take the lead, work, volunteer, life balance, and then just some personal reflections. So about me. So I work in the Chicago office at EFK Moen. I'm a professional engineer. The company is a consultant that does transportation engineering design. Layman's terms, I help to make highways. So IDOT and Illinois Tollway are our clients. I work in the loop, and I've been there for about 4 years in August. So I'll just highlight a few of the organizations I'm a part of right now, and I'll be making references and have some stories later in this presentation. I'm heavily involved with Transport Chicago, which is an annual day-long conference for 300 professionals and students in the city. It takes 9 months of planning, and I got involved because a grad school of mine had said he was doing it, and he did it for a year, and I decided to join the next year, and he already bounced out. So I was like, oh, well, I'll see what this is about. I can always quit. I don't have to, it's not a job. But yeah, this conference planning was entirely new to me. I had no idea. I mean, I've never planned one, but it's basically planning a large wedding, involving a lot of components that go from finding sponsors, so you're trying to get money, sort of fundraising, to handling optics and marketing, and then also handling large expenses for our venue, which was in the 30 to 40K frame. So this group is made up of a lot of planners and public agency employees. So as I'm an engineer and I work for a private firm. So I stand out. But it was really good to get to know other people and what they do. I kind of was in this phase in my life where it's like, I don't know if I want to stick with civil engineering. I don't know if that's, really my calling. What else is in there or out there that's related to transportation, which was my field. So this one was a really great way for me to network, but also promote my company and get my company to sponsor and be supportive of what I was doing. So with this group, I definitely, helped out, became secretary, VP, and then now I'm co-president. So I'll go in further detail about how I got to those steps in those roles. Another group that I'm involved with is WTS, which is Women's Transportation Seminar. And this is suggested by my boss. And so the company also sponsors this organization. And so, with that, I get to go to meetings during office times, and it counts towards it. And I help out on a pretty smaller scale with planning some events here and there. And I get to do it on my own time whenever I feel like it. So it's been a really great group to get to know other women in my field, and they could be planners, they could be engineers, they could be decision makers. So we all come from different walks of life, but we're all still related to the transportation industry in the Chicago area. Another thing that, as Kristen mentioned, I am president or chair of the Young Alumni Council. This council has been in effect for the past 10 years or so, but really getting off the ground the past 5 years. The Young Alumni part is that you've graduated the past 10 years from IIT, where I was passionate about the school, as you'll see on the next slide with my involvement in student organizations. But my main drive has been to connect people. In order to be on the board and to be on that council, the Alumni Board of Directors, I had to be nominated. So again, that was others seeing what I had done before, and it was a great honor to do that. And I wanted to do it justice by giving 100% to both groups. And finally, a small thing that I never thought would be volunteering, but it is being on the Condo Association board. I don't get paid. I do a lot of work for not much thanks, and that's okay. I bought a condo this past summer, and it's a 6-unit building. So it doesn't seem like a lot of work, but there is so much that goes into it. When things fall apart, that's when it's a lot of work. So that has been eye-opening for me. I've only doing it the past year, and I joined because I was invested in the building and not just my own individual unit. And I also wanted to keep an eye on things to find out what is our budget, how is our money being spent. The hardest challenge is not having all the owners in the building help out around the place. And you think that they all have the same stake in the game, but some people are just more interested and have a desire and a real need to want to do the best for everybody. So it kind of falls in with what, not to the same exact scale as what the senator has done, but again, it's just getting involved in trying to help out your neighbors and potentially the neighborhood and then the just local community. So next slide. A little more about what I did on campus. I got my bachelor's in civil engineering. I did have a part-time job on campus. I was a camera scholar, so there was a lot of initiative from me to want to do as much for myself and for the school for the really generous scholarship that I got. My pride and joy would have to be union board. This almost felt like a full-time job, but I was heavily involved with this organization since my freshman year. I was on exec board for sophomore to senior year. I got passionate about it because really I got friends from it, really close friends that I'm still close to now. And my introduction to this group was because I went to one general body meeting, didn't know anybody, and then I went to the cafeteria the next day, and the president of that group of the union board at the time came up to me and was like, hey, I noticed you at this meeting, and he just chatted with me, and that was just it was just a really nice introduction, and I went to all the meetings, and I got to know people. So just something I'm so passionate about, and I've learned so much, which I'll go in greater detail, a lot of skills from all the exec levels that I've held in union board. And then I was also involved with different organizations, Alternative Spring Break, which was just for 1 year, a lot of fundraising and actual hard work, the week of spring break, manual work. I also was involved with Tau Beta Pi and Chi Epsilon. So these engineering honor societies were more of a just getting the word out and getting to know people. And I also, Senator mentioned her involvement with SWE, and I wish I had the time to get more involved with Society of Women Engineers with the Illinois Tech chapter. But I tried to attend events in ASCE, which is American Society of Civil Engineers. I would attend events and participate when I could, but I would say union board took up majority of my time. So then I went to grad school at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I was very pressured by myself to just focus on school. So it was just a 1-year program. So I didn't immediately join anything, but I couldn't not be involved. So I participated in groups, but I didn't get on the exec level, and that was probably the best for me and my sanity and the best for the groups. So I'll allude to them later on in the rest of my presentation. So why volunteer? There are some pretty common reasons I'm sure many of you know, but a few that might not be as clear. Not all organizations will meet your expectations of what you're looking for, and it might be a hit or a miss, but that's the joy in that you get to see if the shoe fits before making a huge commitment. So the next slide, here's a list of reasons that might resonate with you wanting to volunteer. I'll share some stories that tie in with these reasons, and there's personal, social, and professional. So for personal reasons, giving back to somebody or giving back to an organization. So hands down, that's the reason why I give back to IIT. I appreciated everything that I've gained from it, so I have a strong desire to stay connected to the school and to give back in various ways to hopefully help out alums, students, and prospective students. Socially, it's, you know, as I mentioned with Union Board, it was hard to make friends, and it's really hard to make friends outside of college. So, you know, when I was in grad school, I didn't know anybody, and I went from a much, you know, a smaller school to this huge one. And so as a grad student, you know, I felt even more out of reach from, you know, all the other organizations that were reaching out to the undergrads to join their groups. So I joined a resident leadership board in my graduate dorm, and you know, it was because RAs reached out and persuaded me to help out. They had no idea about my involvement at IIT and what I did for Union Board, so it was really refreshing to start over in a sense. And you know, I helped out, but didn't, you know, take on those executive roles. It's a lot to be said to get to know people and make friends. Maybe they're lifelong, maybe they're just acquaintances. You never know what it could lead to. And some of this socializing could lead to professional connections, which brings me to the next slide. So we all know that networking is extremely useful. It depends on how you use it, of course. When you volunteer, I mean, if you have the goal to network, you know, that's your prerogative. But I mean, if you just think of it as behind the scenes, there's just less pressure than going to a networking specific event. So, you know, it's just, I've met a lot of people in the Transport Chicago group, and I don't know if I'll ever work with them directly with the job I'm at now, but who knows, maybe on some other project 5 years down the line, I might, and I'll be familiar with them. Really, the great thing about volunteering and all the organizations I've been involved with is that you gain so many new skills that you might not get the chance to learn while you're in work in your regular paid job, or also while during classes, right? That's why extracurriculars matter so much. I've learned so many, like all the puzzle piece, all of those terms, I've really learned from my volunteering. I mean, you can learn it through your jobs, but I would say that sometimes you don't have those opportunities in your paid job, so you can find it outside of work. And Union Board did that to a large degree for me. I handled a $100K budget. I communicated with IIT admin, you know, the president of the campus at the time, President Anderson, got to know me by the first name, so that was really, really cool. You know, I managed a solid group of 5 exec members plus 20 general body members to provide this big service. So in a way, it was like on a weird scale of being like a CEO, where I had all of these large responsibilities. And how great was it that I got to experience it at college that didn't have the same risks as if I, you know, was an actual CEO with, you know, having to pay employees and, or maybe have shareholders and all the like. So definitely I would suggest to current students to really take advantage of, while you're in college, to try to gain these skills by joining an organization. You don't have to join them all or join as many as I did, but certainly just join with one and see, you know, how you can help out and how it can also benefit you to learn a lot of soft skills, things that really hard, you can develop technical skills at your work, but soft skills, if the opportunities aren't there, you just might not have the ability to really develop them. And then providing an opportunity to learn new professional skills in a safe setting. So like I mentioned, being feeling like I was a CEO was not the biggest risk of people getting fired, people getting laid off. So you get to ask questions, test your knowledge, expand your skill set, all while avoiding the critical eye of your boss when you do this in certain volunteer organizations. So categorized simply, we have personal, social, and professional reasons to volunteer. We all know that it's like, it is better to be well-rounded for your, and this is for students, for your college applications, listing out all your extracurriculars. Same goes for grad school. And that thinking doesn't stop after school. Doing volunteer work in whatever capacity can be included on your resume, LinkedIn page, social media, and even your dating profiles if you wish. This can easily lead to some wonderful opportunities. Leadership volunteer roles certainly will teach and test you a lot more than general volunteering roles. It can show future employers your ability to manage time wisely and that you show initiative. Employers want well-balanced employees because the future of the company depends on people being able to work well together, and soft skills or interpersonal skills are extremely necessary. What else can make you stand out? It's all about your involvement outside of work. In school, it's easy to find volunteer opportunities where there are so many student organizations just there in front of you. Post-college life, it's a bit hard, but it doesn't have to be with so many resources at our fingertips. Next slide. So hopefully I've convinced you volunteering is a great thing for you and others. Now, how do you start this search? Next slide. So which organization to choose? These are just a few ideas, obviously not the full list, but maybe some words will spark some interest for you. You can put it into categories. Maybe you just want to find an organization that fills your passion or interest, or maybe you have some particular skill set and you're like, how can I use this? Who would be best to benefit from it? And then just whatever your goals are, could be very specific, very general, but yeah, you can break it down of finding which orgs match with these categories, or you can maybe if you can find something that's your top picks in all three categories. So you've narrowed it down to what it is. So how do you find them? On the next slide, I give some suggestions, and really the best way is talking to your friends, to your coworkers, neighbors, churchgoers, anybody about what they're involved with. It gives you, new ideas you wouldn't have thought about. It also gives you the real deal, you can ask, how much time do you actually spend on this? What do you really do? Do you feel a lot of benefits? So this is really the best way, in my opinion, to hear about what organizations are out there. And like I said, for Transfer Chicago, I never knew about it until my grad school friend had mentioned it. Easiest way and quickest is probably just to use the internet. So you can actively search for things, but also I would say looking at social media as you go through and you see pictures or whatever, but you also see people's interests shown, what they're involved with, what they're inviting you to. Maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a fundraising event for some cause. So, I mean, that's all, for you to participate and help somebody else, but also you can get involved with those groups. An old school method, I know we're all about technology, but people still post up things on walls and bulletin boards, and still there is print with newspapers and magazines. And newspapers and magazines are great because they highlight organizations that just need that spotlight, or people who have stood out and done a lot. So that's just another way. I will say that I'll give some suggestions if you want to start out with volunteering for IIT. I will say a disclaimer that this presentation is completely voluntary. Like, I'm not getting paid by IIT to promote these roles, but just some suggestions, as I've helped out a lot with it, and I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent volunteering for IIT. So you could be an iPro judge if you're an alum. IIT definitely welcomes back their alums for whatever service that you want to provide. And so that's a one-day commitment. It's held twice a year. You can just reach out, and it doesn't have to be every single iPro day, but just whatever fits in your schedule. Mentorship is huge. The Bridge is trying to, that's the main goal for the Bridge, which if some of you aren't familiar with, it is a website that IIT had created that I would say it's like a LinkedIn network for IIT staff, alumni, admin, students, and alumni. So it's a really great way. We all have valuable insight. Maybe it's not applicable to everyone, but if it helps one person or just a few, it's already really successful and very gratefully appreciated. Mentorship, you can use whatever form. You can use, whatever time frame that you have. It's to your schedule, to your liking. I again have to promote Young Alumni Council, YAC. We're broken down into certain groups, so professional, social, philanthropy, and student recruitment. So those are those categories that, if you only want to work on one or two of them, you can. It's completely your choice. And then there's regional chapters in the various cities for all alums. These groups of alums help to plan out almost any type of event that they desire. It's not IIT saying you need to plan it. It's whatever the alums want, because they understand, go to the source. What is it that we want? What do we want to see? What do we want to do? Large cities have these chapters, and these groups always need members. If you want to create one that isn't in your area, a regional chapter that's already there, you can just initiate and email IIT alumni for information. So next slide. Now you're in an organization and you think you can do more and you want to. So how to take the lead. Next slide. Pretty easy or common sense is that you build up to it. As you can tell from my other previous experiences with organizations on campus and professionally, is that I start small. I attend a meeting, I raise my hand to volunteer to do a small task. Think about what skills you could provide to help improve the organization, and then just move up. You can go for a chair or some position that's not quite exec level, and try different ones to see what it is that you want to do and gain different skills from it. And then talk to the current exec board. Really get the feeler out from their personal experience, so you know what to expect. Essentially you might be working with them if you decide to go for an exec board level or role. So see if you can work with them, and what would be a good partnership. And then go for the exec board position when elections come up. Again, most are made up of this president, VP, treasurer, secretary hierarchy, but it doesn't have to be that way always. Other orgs, teams can be very unique. New roles can be made if there's a reason for it, and maybe you fit the bill for it, or you create the role. So that's building up to it. The other one is, next slide, launching yourself. Basically, just go for it. I would suggest, ideally, for like any exec role except for president or VP. But if you have prior experience from another organization, or you know enough people in that group that you could manage them and nobody would be super offended or weirded out that there's this new person, then yeah, definitely go for it. If someone falls through, and it happens, then just take over. And if and only if you want to take that position. Here's just a big thing, and then I think most people know, but it's good to hear, is that majority of positions is always learn as you go. No one is ever completely prepared or 100% right for the job. You need to grow and develop soft skills, as I mentioned in the earlier slides. I've made many mistakes as in my role in leadership, and that goal from it is just to learn and try not to repeat those mistakes. Hopefully you have resources handy, and even better yet, you have past exec members to give advice. So the next slide is talking about work-volunteer life balance. It's tricky, and everybody is different. I'm currently working with 2 to 3 different orgs on the side to my full-time job. Like I mentioned, my employer is very understanding of my professional organization commitments, and they even pay for the events that I attend. So it's really the best of both worlds, However, I know that's not always the case, and you might be wanting to do something that you definitely won't have all the time or the financial resources to help out with. With this job, I'm able to do some of the volunteer work at my desk because I work at the computer all day, so I can send out emails, I can, contact people, and do more of the paperwork to make sure that things are flowing. So, but it is a struggle. It is every day. Oh, there's always something, and I feel like I'm behind. So, what's the secret? Next slide. Talk about priorities. What's important to you right now? In 2, 5, 10 years, it changes. So, definitely reflect on what it is that you want to do now and what you want to do later, so that you don't overlap and that it doesn't make it a challenge for you in the future. We all have things we want to do versus things we must do. Can you still volunteer without jeopardizing your other responsibilities? What's your availability? This will really dictate the organization and the roles you decide to volunteer for. For example, like if you decide to mentor a student, school, is it, okay, summer breaks, they have a summer break, you'll have a summer break, or maybe it is just for the summer that you mentor. So I did help out, my last point is to be mindful of the true length of volunteering time. With commuting, extra trips for errands, meetings, offshoot events, I had volunteered for Restore Chicago, which is it's a store that Habitat for Humanity organizes, and they find all these donations from other people and they sell it at a much lower cost. I ended up quitting within 6 months because it was a drive. I was going from Pilsen to Skokie. If you're familiar with the Chicago area, it can be a drive, and I was doing it during winter when there was snow, so it was even a longer commute. And I could only really do a few hours on the weekend, so I didn't felt like it was a justified use of my time to be traveling and only doing so little actual physical work hours. So that was really hard to let go, but I knew it was just best for myself and for that organization that I move on from it. So let's say you're in a few leadership roles or only one, and it's becoming very hard to keep up. When do you throw in the towel? And I know this is more of a negative thing, but it's actually a very good thing for your sanity. So the next slide is when to say no to leadership roles. Do not overestimate your time in the future. Do not overthink it, trust your gut instinct. These things, you feel overwhelmed, and I feel that a lot, can lead to stress. It can lead to guilt for letting others down and or not living up to expectations. This is on top of what you feel for your regular job and classes. Don't overthink it, because most of the time others are very understanding and not judging you if you have to back down. Keep in mind that you don't need to say yes simply because you are capable. Just because you can handle doing a project doesn't mean you have to or should. Consider the time needed and make sure you will still be able to comfortably balance your primary personal responsibilities and other commitments. With Transport Chicago, this past year, I had thought originally I wanted to be president, but I had a lot of personal changes, life changes, so I didn't have that confidence to take the lead role. I ended up sharing it with somebody who was also worried about his commitment level, so we co-prez, and it's been interesting and it's been challenging. I wouldn't suggest co-leading for everybody, but there's a lot of communication involved, but my co-lead also was on the exec board with me the year before, so we knew how to work well together. I knew my personal limits not to take full control of that role, so I stopped myself and asked for help, and thankfully I have him as a partner. You need time to recharge in between your responsibilities. Burnouts are very real, so think of transitional or exit strategies short of ghosting or just leaving unannounced. Organizations would rather you take a break and come back than fully quit for good. Hands down, I don't think there's any organization that would say the opposite. And remember that saying no allows others the opportunity to say yes. Addition of new people is a good thing for organizations, as things can easily become stale. For Young Alumni Council, like I mentioned, it's 10 years of graduates. And we're currently trying to diversify the makeup of our council. We have a lot more that are near the 10-year mark. And recent alums better understand current student issues and attitudes. As someone who graduated in 2011, I can't connect as well to a 2019 graduate who has experienced Illinois Tech in a different way, very different manner. There's still some common thread of connections because we went to the same school, but it's less and less so. So next slide, you know that you need to say no, how to say it. Hopefully you like the GIF, but really say no to the request and not the person. Be appreciative. It's almost never an insult when people make requests of you. They're asking for your help because they trust you and they believe in your capabilities to help. So thank them for thinking of you or making the request. Don't worry, this doesn't need to lead to a yes. Provide an explanation. Explain why. The particulars of your reason for saying no make very little difference, but having a reason does. Maybe you're too busy, maybe you don't feel like what they're asking you to do plays to your strengths. Just be honest about why you're saying no. Be prepared to miss out and be ready to give a hard no. Some people can be very pushy, but you just need to push back and they'll respect you for it. Being prepared to miss out is a little bit like FOMO, fear of missing out. Some of us have a hard time saying no because we hate to miss an opportunity. Remind yourself that when you're saying no to the request, you're also saying yes to something you value more than the request. Both are opportunities. You're just choosing one over the other. And finally, my second to last slide is personal reflections. And this is no particular order of importance. Think ahead in your schedule. What you can do right now might not be the case in 6 months if you know something's coming up. Life happens, so don't let that deter you from taking a chance and volunteering in a lead role, but be aware of this element. Time management is crucial to the success of your organization and its goals, but also for your sanity. Time to time, evaluate your priorities. And regularly, because it's easy to get into a routine and do what's expected rather than what you enjoy. When it's no longer fun, it may be time to stop. When you need a break, let others know sooner than later. You can usually always come back to the group with open arms. Better to let others down gently than leaving unexpectedly. Let go of your ego to ask for help. This has been a hard thing for me to follow, but I'm seeing the disastrous effects when I don't. In general, people want to help, but they don't know how. So if you need to delegate work, do it. This gives them a sense of direction and lightens your workload and decreases your stress so that you can be a better leader for them. Losing passion and then when volunteering becomes a chore, it's probably time to go. It's easy to become resentful, and this cycle of feeling guilty that you don't care as much as you used to can get you down. It's better to get out before it gets worse, and you're not able to look fondly back at your time in that organization. And finally, as a leader, it's easy to lose sight of the efforts of others. I'm recently learning this through my role as Young Alumni Council Chair. I've worked on some hard tasks, and it might seem to me that other leaders haven't done much in that same time frame. But each task is different, so my perception is likely very off. Giving people benefit of the doubt at first is really the best thing for them and you, so you don't go mad thinking the worst of everyone. So finally, that's kind of my spiel of what it's been like having all these involvements and being a leader for quite a few different organizations and different interests. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Thanks, Angela. We actually do have a couple of questions that came in. So the first one is from Gabriel, and they ask, if you had $10 million that you could invest in a nonprofit initiative, what would you want to invest it in?
That's a really good question. I think something environmentally. For me, just climate change is a really big deal. As an engineer and scientist, I think that would benefit everyone, and it's not just a subset of people. So I think I would use that money to help as many people as I can. So really just to take care of this planet. So yeah, that would probably be it.
And then our next question was, how do you decide whether to participate in one-time volunteer opportunities or get involved in an organization long-term?
It's a really good question. I think it just, again, trying it out. In high school, I volunteered at the library. My dad would always go every week, so I went with him. I picked out my own books, but then I ended up going to the youth department and seeing if they had any roles. And I really enjoyed it. And that was me taking time, a few hours during the weekend to go. It was also a routine for my dad, so I had that. It was always scheduled. For my other organizations where it's more of a long-term commitment, and so for that, I mean, I did it for a couple of years in high school, and then when I left, I came to college, then I had to stop volunteering there. But I made some good friends from volunteering at the library. For the long-term ones, I mean, I think it's really your drive and your passion, also who you work with, right? That for me, that is a big factor. If I know, can be disheartening if at times other people aren't really working together with you and you're doing a lot more, you just lose that passion. But if you have a good group, it's something that with Union Board, I had a lot of challenges and a lot of times I wanted to kind of give up just personally. But then maybe just because I felt that others depended on me and I depended on them, that I kept going with wanting to be in that organization.
All right. Well, thank you again, Angela, and thank you again, Senator. We have really enjoyed today's presentation. And just as a reminder, this presentation was recorded, so it will be available on the Illinois Tech Alumni YouTube page. It should be up within the next week. So if anyone has any other final questions, please feel free to chat them. And thank you again both so much.
Thanks, Kristen, and it's really nice to meet you too, Angela.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you all for listening in.
All right. Thanks.